Hello, I am Locke, and this is Maya, the channel where I have broken so many copyright laws in this video that it will probably never be able to make me anything and will probably be closed to many countries. But I don't care, I just hope someone gets to see it because it was pretty cool to do.
For years, we've seen Halloween episodes being about fear and spookiness. But I came to embrace the true meaning of Halloween, the fact that it's goth Christmas. And it's with plenty despair and sorrow that I bring you my favorite horror game of them all, Vampire the Masquerade.
But look, this is paper. Papers aren't games.
Don't worry, my sweet summer child. Paper can in fact be games, and pretty fun ones too, where the fun occurs in our imagination. Tabletop role-playing games have origins in wargaming, which has roots in ancient strategy games, particularly chess, which originated from an ancient Indian game called Chaturanga. From the late 18th century to the 19th century, chess variants evolved into modern wargames that we will more commonly know, most notably Kriegspiel. But the ones that are all the craze between those kids you avoid during break were born in the 1970s by the drug-infused minds of Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson. Dungeons & Dragons was the basis for everything you love and hold dear, like Final Fantasy, Ultima, Dragon Quest, and of course satanic rituals. No wait, maybe that one's just a myth. Anyways, D&D was the basis for a revolution, where people who longed for social interaction but couldn't talk to a girl if their lives depended on it, found themselves happy and accomplished in their fantasy worlds of heroes and villains in RPG. But I'm not here to talk about happiness, I'm here to talk about horror, deeply disturbed beings hanging over the dark precipice of madness by the last thread of humanity. Vampires are the coolest crap you'll find around, and there's no better depiction of them than in Vampire the Masquerade.
It is a world of darkness. The sin of Cain has spawned the cursed horror that stalks the night in search of living blood. The kindred have long been a secret influence through all ages of human history, plotting against each other in a never-ending jihad. Their immortal progeny are among us to this day, hidden from the eyes of humanity by an elaborate masquerade.
Created in 1991 by Mark Reinhagen of White Wolf Publishing, Vampire was the first game in the Storyteller System line of tabletop RPGs. Begone 20-sided dice, it's time for the 10-sided dice to shine. There's not much light here for it to shine on. Vampire the Masquerade is a game about psychological and personal horror, where players are tasked to keep their undead lives night after night inside the convoluted society of kindred, the name those vampires call themselves. In 1991, Vampire was notably new in many respects. It was conceived as a dark, moody, urban fantasy game that not only focused on horror, but also in the power fantasy scenario of playing a superpowered being in a damned world. The game focused on plots, intrigue, and story, as opposed to more straightforward dungeon scenarios like D&D and its other neighbors, and had success in the fact that the RPG industry in general had been trending towards a more narrative approach. Vampire was one of the first games of its kind to center on these themes. Games of Vampire often use the Curse of Cain to explore themes of morality, depravity, the loss of humanity, salvation, and personal horror. Every player is tasked with but one goal: to survive the many perils and missions any of the elder vampires may ask them with during their time, and surviving undead night itself, faced with the sudden hunger for blood and the need of it in order to keep existing. And the worst enemy, the beast, living within each vampire, a metaphorical being that shows its fangs, often in fits of uncontrollable rage, and slowly but surely crawl to the surface of the kindred's mind, twisting every action towards its goal for total unhinged control. Vampires in the World of Darkness make use of several familiar tropes of vampires in myth and legend alike, such as immortality and a powerful thirst for blood. They are truly undead, as their hearts do not beat. They do not require food or drink. They do not age. Their skin is cold and pale, and the only sustenance they require is blood. Despite their undead status though, vampires of this world are thinking, feeling beings capable of thought, emotion, and sometimes even empathy. Although that will probably be the first thing you throw away in the cold nights that follow, not that you feel any of the cold. As for weaknesses, sunlight is probably the worst enemy you can find, as its natural rays will burn any vampire in seconds. Fire is also terribly aggravating to a kindred's body. A stake to the heart will not kill you, but it will paralyze you forever, until a kind soul takes it out. But in this world, your biggest fear will always be the beast. As I said before, it continuously crawls in the back of your head, trying to make you give in to your primal instincts of violence without a care. The only weapon against the beast is the vampire's own humanity, something that is represented by some dots in your character sheet, but mean much more than that in the act of role-playing your character in-game. In the overall World of Darkness, vampires are not the strongest creatures, as the mages and werewolves can open you a new one with ease, but to me they are the most interesting ones, as their powers don't come from a gift or an honor-bound task, but from a curse of damnation that can be traced all the way back to the original sin. Or that is what they want you to believe. The meta plot of the game never really states the true origin of the Cainite curse, so if it is an interest to your game, you as the game master should create a reason yourself for it, or as a player should search for it. There are many intricacies in the storyteller system, but for me, the most important and notable one, and the one that differs it from all the other tabletop RPGs out there, is that storyteller games are quite deadly. There are only 7 points of life that can be dragged out with the swing of a sword or the trigger of a handgun, and although vampires have supernatural powers that make them much more than a common human being, you are still killable, and kill you the world will try. The game's main concept is the integrity of the masquerade, a concept that keeps vampires in secret in the modern world. It is explained in many different ways in the many times Vampire the Masquerade was depicted in the media, and the gist of it is, to keep their own undead lives, vampires hide from society, never revealing themselves to it, in order to keep their hides intact. The fact is, vampires need living blood to survive, as maintaining your undead life tasks your body with the need to constantly burn vitae, or blood, in order to keep existence. And that means vampires are usually city dwellers. The sun limits the range of action to roofed cities, and they need humans and all creatures around to keep existing. Some kill rats and other animals for sustenance, but only human blood has enough nutrition. Though the victim doesn't have to be sucked dry, fledglings will often kill out of mistake or lack of self-control, which may attract unwanted attention, so the masquerade keeps everything under tight control, killing the inept in hiding themselves and manipulating the way humanity sees us, those events, in order to keep the status quo. The perfect society if the egos of these immortal, ageless beings weren't as big as the thirst for blood. Often the older vampires will control the younger in order to quench the need for power, or any other petty thing, as living for thousands of years more often than not desensitize you of any pleasure, and those beings need to find new ways to treat themselves. And usually, in a game of Vampire the Masquerade, you're tasked to take care of meaningless tasks for the others, and to come to grips with your new reality, as you slowly turn into one of them and become the villain yourself. It is a very interesting game that unfortunately depends much on the game master's idea and can often end up being dull if he doesn't know what he's doing or if the players are too immature to really understand the dreadful reality of being a cursed being. The game's play mechanics are really simple to grasp, even for new RPG players. Especially for new RPG players actually, because instead of number crunching or an accountant level skills, you only need to color some dots on your character sheet to do stuff, and the action taken during gameplay are expressed using only 10-sided dice. The number of dice used correspond to the player's current skill level, often based on 2 different skills that together represent the player's ability. For example, to land a punch, the character dexterity plus brawl are combined. The resulting number is the number of dice rolled to perform the task. It is up to the storyteller to set how high a dice roll must be to be considered a success, but usually a 6 is a standard for actions. Vampires have many different mechanics on their sheet. All vampires have a blood pool, signifying the amount of human blood or vitae currently in their body. It can be spent to power the vampiric disciplines, the vampire superpowers. These powers simulate many of those portrayed in film, such as turning into animals or mist, breaking iron walls with your bare hands, or having a natural charisma and powers of hypnotic suggestion and control. Other scores are humanity, which dictate how close to losing yourself to the beast, and consequently your character, you are, self-control and conscience, that are used to process actions and horrific events that happen to you, and courage, used to face danger, of course. The last most important one probably is willpower, that often serves as a measure of how strong you are here, and how strong you can be against those impossible tasks. Insistent willpower often gives you auto successes in any tasks and is the measure of difficulty other characters have to mind controlling you. Now that you know about your shit, it is time to start planning your game. The first step is choosing which clans your players can use and which sect they will be a part of. In the world of Vampire the Masquerade, players are divided between 13 clans and 2 sects, which on a quick glance sound like the good and the bad guys. But at the end of the day, everyone is the bad guy here. The Camarilla is the sect that created the masquerade and maintains vampires hidden in plain sight inside of our human society. They have very intricate hierarchies that work akin to a medieval feudal lord, with the prince governing the city or district with the help from his primogenies, one from each clan, to give the illusion of inclusion. His sheriff will have deputies to maintain the peace and often will clear any accidents that might happen, and many more positions of power in an overly complex ladder for each city, controlled by even older vampires in Europe, probably, but you're not really sure those are real tales. The Camarilla follows the traditions and rules and force them upon any vampires who come into their cities. But the most important one is the first tradition that dates to the 15th century. Thou shalt not reveal thy true nature to those not of the blood. Doing such shall renounce thy claims of blood. The Masquerade. But what about the bad guys? Well, the bad guys are probably the Sabbat. The Sabbath was formed during a huge anarch revolt in response to the oppressive rule of the elder vampires of the Camarilla. The Sabbath do not openly follow the traditions, but instead adhere to a system of self-rule, freedom, and interdependence. The Sabbath believe themselves superior to humans and ultimately believe that they should rule over the human world rather than hide from it. Many members have a flagrant disregard for human life, which is evidenced in the brutal tactics they use in their unending jihad. While anyone may ostensibly claim membership in the Camarilla, the Sabbath have brutal initiation rites, where characters must prove their loyalty. They also practice many cult-like rituals, and a form of ceremonial group blood bonding called the Valdehi to ensure loyalty. It is very easy to call these guys the villains, and in the game where there are players with less experience, it's easier to treat them like they really are. But the issues with the Camarilla and the Sabbath go way beyond black and white. Everything in the world of darkness is grey. No one is your friend, and everything represents danger to the only thing that is truly important: survival. After deciding on the sect, you can finally start choosing the clans. There are 13 clans in Vampire the Masquerade. Each represents one of the 13 elder vampires known as the Antediluvians, survivors of God's biblical flood. Each one of those were grandchildren of Cain, the first sinner, vampires of the third generation, filled with immense power and representing different characteristics of Cain. They are long gone, but their eternal jihad still lives among the many clans. The 13 clans of Vampire the Masquerade are all different in their available disciplines or powers and their weaknesses. Beyond the weakness to fire and the sun, each vampire has one major flaw that descends all the way from his unwanted bloodline, and those are not chosen but inherited by the one who embraces you. There are 7 clans on the Camarilla. The Bruja were a clan of noble philosophers and warrior poets, but in modern nights, they are rebels, anti-authoritarians, and anarchists. Bruja possess the disciplines of strength and speed, but also presence, which alludes to their leadership skills. They are true warriors, but the flaw is that their great passion for anything they are fighting for or rebelling against. For a Bruja to resist a beast is a great feat, as they are easy to anger and hard to hold. The Gangrel are a clan of animalistic shapeshifters who are hard to find in crowded cities, as they prefer to live among nature and its aspects. Independent and more interested in their own survival, the Gangrel prefer to run with wild animals rather than play politics with others of their kind. Gangrel are masters of the discipline protein, which allows them to change their bodies into bestial shapes. But their flaw is their merit though. When a Gangrel frenzies out of control, he grows animal features and characteristics. It may start easy with a glowing red eye, but soon you will end up with a beak or a tail, and well, that will be a problem for the Masquerade. Gangrel are also one of the 7 founding members of the Camarilla, but after the 1990s in the game's meta plot, they turned independent. But that doesn't matter. Gangrel players are very common in Camarilla coteries, or coteries, the name of the parties in this game. The Malkavian are known as madmen and lunatics. Their great power is their insight into the intricacies of the world. Upon the embrace, they receive visions of millions of different events and insights into the truth around them. Events on the future and on the past break their minds and turns them mad forever. Their unique discipline is dementation, which spreads their madness like a plague upon anyone they use it on. The Malkavian are the hardest of all the clans to play correctly, as the madness comes not from loony things, but are usually disturbing and unnerving to others around them, and as most flaws, its effects are usually unpredictable. When everything is okay, the Game Master might give you a panic attack, or start your visions, change your personality, stuff like that. All Malkavian players must choose a derangement when creating the character from a list, or create one with the Game Master. The Nosferatu are the clan of true monsters, as they are all horrific beasts with huge arrays of different possible disgusting details like pus-filled pustules, pointy ears, grey skin, monster deformities, or even worse, English teeth. The flaw is that they are turned into those deformed monsters when embraced, and this causes them to be marginal even to kindred society, forced to live in the sewers and closed space like rats. They counter this by being holders of secrets and information. Nosferatu know about everything, and having them as allies is imperative to any leader of the vampiric society. Although they are usually treated like disgusting beasts, they have extreme value. The disciplines include powers of stealth, supernatural strength, and animal handling that are very useful when you are a walking masquerade breaking machine. The Toreador are a clan of beauty, lovers of the arts, sensitive, and sometimes hedonistic monsters. The Toreador are fascinated by the mortal world and its creations, enthralled by the ever-changing mortal world. They are one of the few clans who seek to keep up with it. Toreador often embrace for beauty, or to preserve artistic talent. The flaw, though, is that beauty can often be so utterly captivating to them that it paralyzes them completely for a period of time, where they can only focus in awe towards the piece of art. And just like art, this flaw is up to the player to decide, as some are less captivated by a beautiful painting and more attracted to gruesome and violent scenes of carnage. Toreadors are dangerous. In their craving for artistic pleasure, they often go way beyond reason to quench their taste for art, in the broadest use of the word possible. The Tremere are blood sorcerers and mage, originally belonging to a real order of real mages from the other White Wolf game. They gained their immortal status by experimenting with Tzimisce Vitae, and their founder gained his vampiric powers by diablerizing. Diablerie being the act of consuming another vampire and acquiring his powers and strength, something that other vampires are disgusted by. The victim was the antediluvian of the Salubric clan, a long dead and forgotten clan that was demonized by the Tremere in the Middle Ages. The discipline of thaumaturgy allows them to use the power of their blood to cast spells, but the dependency on Vitae makes them more easily susceptible to blood bonds. The clan is highly organized, and its members are all partially bloodbound to the ruling 7 elders of the clan. Playing as a Tremere will often be an interesting but hard experience, as they are usually pawns in a much larger game between the Tremere Chantries, the Camarilla, and the plans of those 7 elders. The last clan of the Camarilla are their leaders, the Ventrue, aristocrats, kings, and leaders of men and kindred alike. Ventrue often seek power and wealth in order to further keep their reign over kindred and humanity alike. Their unending thirst for power moves the clan onwards as the most common leaders wherever they go. But the Ventrue are really picky eaters. Their flaw dictates that they may only feed from a specific kind of vessel, like virgins, blondes, youngest siblings, aristocrats, etc., which the player selects during the creation of their character. Those are the 7 clans of the Camarilla, and the most common faces you will find around. But I did say 13, didn't I? There are 2 clans that are most commonly seen in the Sabbat. The La Sombra, which are the dark versions of the Ventrue with much cooler powers. La Sombra see power over others and self-mastery as their noble obligation. As one of the founding clans of the Sabbat, the La Sombra are fearless and dangerous. They practice a discipline known as obtenebration that allows them to manipulate shadows and darkness. They can turn shadows into material horrors, tentacles, and monsters in a true Lovecraftian nightmare. But as a result of their signature discipline, they do not appear in mirrors or on film that use mirrors in its development, being easy to spot and terribly weird to humans. Good thing they couldn't care less about this masquerade bullshit. But the ones who really don't care about it are the Tzimisce. Otherworldly and scholarly, the Tzimisce rule over their lands in Eastern Europe for centuries. Like the La Sombra, the Tzimisce also claim to have destroyed their founder and are pillars of the Sabbat. Alien but mystical, the Tzimisce use their unique flesh and bone shaping discipline of vicissitude to transform themselves into inhuman beings that they consider superior to simple human forms. Unlike the Nosferatu though, who are cursed, the Tzimisce use their powers delightfully, turn themselves into monsters and using others as canvases for the meat arts. They are monstrosities and make even worse ones. Their flaw are their ties to their lands where they were embraced. If they do not rest within proximity of at least 2 handfuls of the land where they were born or embraced, they become increasingly debilitated. Tzimisce are often hard to play, and even harder to grasp, as they house the most horrific and inhuman vampires in the game, often being villains in vampire stories, like in the old PC game Vampire the Masquerade Redemption, where Vukodlak acts as the game's main villain, trying to convert Christoph Romuald, our hero, to his battle against the Antediluvians. There are 9 clans that are available for players to use, but the other 4 are also possible, but often come with some issues. The true independent clans are Assamite, which are the assassin clan. They have the exclusive discipline Quietus, that is used mainly for stealth assassination and blood poisoning of others. Assamites are a special clan coming from the Middle East and are usually hired killers. They don't officially pledge their will to any sect and are very difficult to put in games. Their flaws come from the curse that Tremere placed on the entire clan in order to curb their rampant diablerie problem. As a result, the clan could not consume vitae without suffering terrible wounds and is unable to benefit from any diablerie. The Giovanni are the mafia clan. They come from a very wealthy Venetian merchant family of necromancers, whose patriarch, Augustus Giovanni, was embraced into the clan Cappadocian. Giovanni exterminated his parent clan, diablerized its founder, and founded a new clan. But in doing so, he gained the enmity of the larger kindred community. Branded the Devil Kindred, the Giovanni made peace with the rest of the clans by swearing to remain neutral in their jihad. The flaw is one of the worst. Their bite, which in other vampires is normally pleasurable to the victim, causes excruciating pain, creating the everlasting shock and memory of having been bitten. Players are usually not members of this clan, as they don't have reason or interest in anything besides their necromantic rituals, wealth and power acts, and they act better at supporting NPCs than player characters. The Ravenous are the clan of the Gypsy, often treated like outcasts, thieves and charlatans. While some among them follow Indian spiritual beliefs concerning cycles of incarnation and all that bullshit, others are simple opportunists taking advantage of whatever chaos can be had. Ravenous rarely embrace those not of Eastern European Romani backgrounds. They practice a special discipline known as chemistry, which allows them to create illusions. All Ravenous indulge in a particular vice though, as their clan weakness, like kleptomania, hard drugs, pathological lying, anything like that. And our last clan are the followers of Set, or Setites, a clan of cultists who worship their antediluvian progenitor, the Egyptian snake god Set. They are masters of secret and forbidden lore and foster corruption and desperation in the world as part of their worship of their god. Their signature discipline was Serpentis, which allows them to take on aspects of snakes. Setites are especially sensitive to the light though, and take twice as much damage from sunlight than other vampires. Those are the 13 clans of Vampire the Masquerade. The Camarilla clans can also be on the Sabbat or the La Sombra and the Camarilla. When out of the sect they are called anti-tribu. And there are also lots of bloodlines that are not very important right now. After choosing a sect for the game, and your players choosing their clans, it's time to start playing. Vampire can be played in whatever modern city in the world, and there are many extra books like Chicago by Night, New York by Night, Mexico City by Night to help you develop your games. And then with all this information and background, you're ready to play. There are many other amazing games available in what we today call the Old World of Darkness. Games like Werewolf the Apocalypse and Mage the Ascension are fan favorites that received as much praise as the original Vampire. The others are not as popular, but can be as fun as the main three. They are Wraith the Oblivion, Changeling the Dreaming, Mummy the Resurrection, Demon the Fallen, Kindreds of the East, and one of my favorite games actually, Hunter the Reckoning. Nowadays, the new World of Darkness continuity has many new games that I've never cared much about, but they still continue many of the tropes and legacies started with this book in 1991. And I recommend players to dive into this world of horror with their friends, with help from our sponsor, Pizza and Budweiser. The World of Darkness is an interesting and intricate experience for any RPG players trying to find a more adult and dark experience. But remember, these games are best played by adults. They tackle very sensitive topics and can be sort of maybe influence people to make some crazy shit, so be careful with that. And remember, when you meet sexy people at the Halloween party today, don't kiss. Or even better, don't go to the party. Don't go door to door and stay at home. The biggest horror is still at large. Stay at home and play some Vampire the Masquerade. And I'll see you when Gehenna strikes. This video was actually supposed to go before Halloween, but I hope you guys actually liked this. It was very interesting to make, and if anyone wants to hear more about tabletop RPGs, I have plenty of real world experience on them, unfortunately, and I could bring some more games to you and even work a bit more on freshening out how to play and how to use those games. So like and subscribe, and I guess I'll see you guys next time.